Well, what is up, Mission Church? How are we doing? Good, grand, wonderful. It's so awesome. Man, my name is Mike Hickerson. I am honored to be the lead pastor of Mission Church. And if you're hanging in Oxnard, can we just give Oxnard a big welcome from Ventura? Say, what's up? What's up? Yes, hanging online in the patio. Oxnard, we're going to be real quiet. We want you to cheer 1 second. So we're going to listen real hard from Pacifica. So just say hey to Ventura, Oxnard. Go ahead. Oh, okay, we got it. We totally heard it. Well done. Awesome, man. I love our church. I love what God is doing to help people find and follow Jesus. That's why we exist as a church. Man, there are no perfect people, but there's a really great God. And that's one of the truths that we cling to. That's one of the things that we need to be reminded of all the time. In fact, you're going to get used to this if you're new. It's going to be fine. It's a little invasive, but trust me, just for a second. I know you don't yet. We just met, but that's okay. Just give me a benefit of the doubt. So I want you to turn to the people next to you, and I just want you to say, hey, you're not perfect. So just turn to them. It's okay, you just met, maybe. This is a little awkward. You're going to have a hard time picking them up later. Kidding, see? And they're going to look back at you and go, well, you're not perfect either, right? So that's like, because it's a little offensive. It's a little off-putting when somebody says what you know that you're not perfect, but when you have to tell somebody else or they tell you, it feels like, well, but I'm not that bad, right? Or am I? And what we've said here at Mission, man, is that there are no perfect people. And it's terrible to be reminded of later when we're in conflict with each other. Like, don't do it when you're in a fight, okay? Don't do it then. But it's great to be reminded of that as we're the church together. And to realize, man, none of us by our own devices or by ourselves can be perfect. But God sent his perfect son, Jesus, into the mess to rescue and to save us and to give us the right to become much loved sons and daughters of God. That is who we are. Man, that is great stinking news for us. And so one of the things that we tether ourselves to all the time around here as Mission, if you're just checking Mission out, we call a truce for an hour on Sunday, because if it's true that God is who he says he is, then that has some big ramifications for our life. And if it's true that God is who he says he is, that means that there is literally hope for every single one of us, no matter where we've been or what we've come through, because of Jesus, and the author and the perfecter of our faith. Man, so change is possible is what we cling to. That anyone is welcome. That change is possible, that there are no perfect people, but there really is hope for everyone. And I don't know what the season has been like for you. We've just been talking as a church a little bit for like 18 months now. Like, it's been a season. It's been a decade of a season. You know, you may, you're all grabbing our shorts right here and kind of catching our breath a little bit, because it's still going on. We're still in the middle of all the ramifications of what we're walking through together as a community, as a nation, as a world. And it's complicated at best in this season. It can be exhausting at best in this season. And what we found is that in this season, drift happens. I mean, there's a lot of other stuff that happens, so we can just talk about it. We know that happens, but drift happens. And we wanted to remind ourselves in this, where we're at together, is that there's always an anchor for our soul. There is always a place to anchor. Jesus as the anchor of our soul, both firm and secure. I mean, we can hold on to that hope. That's what we have in the midst of all the chaos, in the midst of all the storms, in the midst of all the uncertainty, in the midst of all the unrest. We have this firm place to anchor, and that's in Jesus. And that's what we cling to. But drift happens. No matter where we're anchored, if we don't do anything, drift happens. So we said, you know what? Drift happens when we stop trusting and start controlling. I mean, when they do, not you, because you probably aren't controlling them or their behavior. But when they start controlling and stop trusting, that's when drift happens for our lives. When we stop gathering and we start isolating, that's when drift happens. We talked about isolation isolates. Just say, this is it. So I'm going to say it again, and it's going to make more sense then. So you just say, isolation isolates. See? It makes it better. It totally makes it better. So that's what happens. That we start drifting when we stop gathering and start isolating. When we stop doing the things that were bringing us health and surrounding ourselves with the people that were bringing us in healthy places, we drift. Our soul drifts. Our mind drifts. We drift relationally when we stop healing and we start seeping. You know, that stuff where we were being transformed from the inside out. God was doing some of that work in us, making us that new creation, living up to our identity as much loved sons and daughters. He was giving us the power to be transformed by the inside out, renewing our mind and all that kind of stuff, right? And all of a sudden we just stopped healing, and all that, we drifted back into some places where we just started seeping all of our unhealth everywhere, right? That's what we talked about last week. This week we're going to talk about when drift happens when we stop working and we stop watching. And next week we'll wrap up with when we stop pressing and we start coasting. And what we've said all along the way, all that we have to do to drift Nothing. Been on the lazy river, right? You've been in the ocean, right? Like, if you just want to chill out, the current is going to take you wherever it wants to go. All you have to do to drift, all I have to do to drift is nothing. And that's why we kicked off this series with this little verse in Hebrews. It says, we must pay the most careful attention to what we have heard so that we do not drift away. Because it's possible for all of us to drift. And we've all been in this season where we've had the potential to drift. And so in this season, literally, when we're talking about today is when we stop working and we start watching. A lot of us in this season, like literally, we had to stop working the way that we were used to working. And we started watching. I mean, Amazon and Netflix and Disney Plus doing just fine right now in pandemic, right? Like, we literally stopped working the way that we were accustomed to, and we just started watching. It happened in my house. I don't know. So it's like, we didn't watch Survivor for, decades, Jody and I, and now my girls and I, we just watched it all. I mean, they're ready to outplay, outlast right now. Like, let's go for it. They'll go. They're Jeff. You want to see what you're playing for? You got it all right now. So I can do all of Survivor. I didn't know. Gilmore Girls on repeat. I didn't know, but I'm Team Jess and not Dean, but she should have married Logan, right? So I just stopped working and guys are like, I don't know, it's all right, it's good, you'll be fine. We've been the whole Marvel universe we went through. Jody doesn't even like Marvel movies, but now she knows all about it, right? And I don't know how many British baking shows you could possibly get, but they're so nice to each other. They're not American at all. They really are nice. It's amazing. But we stopped watching and we stopped working and we started watching. And then some of us did this in our faith journey. I love technology. I love the ability that we had to gather in complicated situations, but a lot of us were serving, or we were doing acts of service, or we were making ourselves of service, and it was part of our journey to being whole from the inside out. It's part of how God took our eyes off of ourselves and let us be of service to other people, where we realized and put into practice that it's not about us. And then what happened to us, we still needed this religious or spiritual community, but all we could do, a lot of us, is just watch it and not work or serve at it. And then we realize, we wake up a year and a half later and it's like, oh, I've drifted. Because I'm not serving, I'm just consuming. And I'm not like engaged, I'm just watching. And church was never, ever, ever meant to be a spectator sport for people to just watch. People is what makes the church. Connected together, serving each other, using the gifts that God has given each one of us to be able to point to everyone in a watching world towards Him. When we have needs, we're in it with each other. When we need to serve each other, we're in it with each other. When we need to allow people to serve us. I know that's hard for some of us to be able to do, is that you may have needs, and there's people in this room and people in this community that you may need something from, and you were taught you don't need nothing from anybody. You're your own man, and you don't know me or my story or where I came from, but I pull myself by my own bootstraps, and I don't need you. But that's not true about the church. We need each other, and it's not just a spectator sport. My hope for all of us in this season, as we're learning and kind of coming out of the COVID fog, is like my hope for all of us is that we know that we have a role. And I'm not just talking about within the building or in the walls of the church or in the initiatives of the church. I'm talking about that God has uniquely wired you and has you exactly where He has you for such a time as this. And it's significant. You have a significant role to play in the body. I just want you to turn to the people that you told they weren't perfect. So now just turn to them and just say, God has a role for you. Just go ahead and do it right now. God has a role for you. And then turn around and they're going to look back at you and they're going to say, God has a role for you. And I know that sounds crazy right now, because some of us are like, I'm the least person qualified for God to use. I don't even know what I think about Him. I've got some serious anger issues towards Him. I've got some doubts and some cynicism and some skepticism towards Him. I'm just telling you, you can bank on it. God has a significant role for you in His kingdom. And some of you, that scares you so much, and some of you know it, and you've been running from the weight of that for so long. You are extremely important. You may not feel like it. You may not understand it. You may not think that you're significant in His kingdom, but that doesn't change the fact that God says that you are. I know we can spend all of our lives arguing with whether God says I am or if God is right or I'm wrong. A lot of us want to spend a lot of time arguing with God, me included. I'm just saying your feelings don't change God's opinion on the matter of if he thinks you're important and have a role to play. And that's helpful for me to remember you are significant. So get involved in serving somewhere in our community. Work in tandem with other people that are going the same direction as you. Watch how God uses you to impact your world, where you work, live, and play. You have a role. My dream is that you would know your role in the kingdom. The second is that my hope for all of us is that we would all be entrenched relationally. We would have great relationships. Like we know that we are imperfect people. So that means that everyone we're going to be in relationship with means that we're going to be in relationship with imperfect people, and so are they. We got to get over that. We're not going to agree on everything, but we're going to be the kind of people that are in this together. We have God at the center, and we are entrenched relationally. God uses people to help people grow. Always has and always will. God uses people to help people grow. So what I want to do today is I want to walk through a pretty famous event in history, walk through a verse where Jesus performed some miracles, and then pull out a challenge and get really practical for us that have the tendency to drift. And so we stop working and we stop watching, and we're realizing, oh man, that's me. I just drifted here. How did I get here, and how did I end up here? So here's the challenge that we got today. So it's in Matthew 14, verse 13, and it starts out like this. Then Jesus heard what had happened. So let me tell you what had happened. His cousin, John the Baptist, his last name wasn't the Baptist. You have to read your Bible to understand. But so he was baptizing people. But so John had just been killed. And that's like the one that, man, Jesus said there's no man born of woman that's greater than John the Baptist. John the Baptist was the one that was like, man, he saw Jesus, and he's like, he must increase and I must decrease. Like John the Baptist was a forerunner, one of those like that knew exactly who Jesus was and what he was called to. So it was like, this is painful for Jesus. When he had heard what had happened, they killed John. And he knows what's coming. Jesus knows what's coming for him. He withdrew by a boat to a solitary place. He just, when you hear that news sometimes, you're just like, I gotta just get away. He's got to get away with his father. He's got to get away. He's like pushing away from people. He just needs a second to get his mind and his heart and his soul wrapped around exactly what had just happened, right? So verse 13 goes on to say this. Hearing of this, the crowds followed him on foot from the towns. And Jesus is like, can I just get 1 second? I just need 1 second. I'm on this boat. Everyone knows who's dead. This is somebody that was close to me. I just need a second to myself, but the people just keep following Jesus. He's on a boat. You could sing that if you want. He's on a boat right there, and people are walking all along the shore trying to figure out where he's going to end up because they need something from him. They're not worried for him. They need something from him. Been there? When you've withdrawn and you're like, I think that people just need stuff from me, and they don't really want anything for me. Verse 14, when Jesus landed, he saw a large crowd. He had compassion. This is how you know that Jesus is way better than any of us, because that's the last emotion that I would be feeling in that moment when I just got news that my best friend was killed, and I know what's coming for me, and I'm just trying to get away to collect my thoughts and anchor my soul and steady my heart. I just need a second away, and all these people need something from me but don't want anything for me. And he walks off into that situation, and he has compassion for everybody. That's how you know he's the Son of God, because that's the only way that that's working right there, because nothing in me would want to do that. But compassion is this love in action, and he healed their sick. What compassion is, he saw a need in that moment, and he met a need. He felt like God had put him uniquely in that specific place for that specific reason at that specific time to do what only he could do. And he had love in action, compassion, that thing that comes from the guts. He wasn't playing it. He wasn't faking it. It's just who he was to be able to say, like, you're in such need and my heart hurts for that. What can I do in this unique moment, in this unique space and time that God has given us as our passive cross with unique ability and the unique gifts that I have to lean in to see what God would want to do in this situation? That's what Jesus does in that moment. He didn't just think about what should be done. He didn't, that's what I do. I was like, how did you people get hungry? What was your plan? You didn't have a plan? You're just going to show up and be hungry? You're going to show up and be sick and I'm supposed to do everything for you? That's the way it's working out? He didn't criticize the Jewish system that had sick people everywhere and didn't take care of them well enough. He didn't wait for the professional healer person to come around. He just said, you know what? I got to lean in this moment. He saw a need and he met a need with what he could do. I think there's a clue in there for us, if you're listening, of where we're headed. He wasn't complaining. He wasn't withdrawing just to get away from all the people because he hated all the people. He shows up and there's a huge group of people in front of him that have needs. And he goes, maybe God has placed me here for this unique time with what only I can do. Verse 15, as evening approached, the disciples came to and said, this is a remote place and it's already getting late. Can you hear them? You know the person at dinner? Yeah, dinner is a place that we used to go at restaurants when you could go out and eat. Kidding. So you know the person at dinner when there's a big group dinner and they somehow have the key to leave and they know if they get up, everyone else leaves? I don't have this key in my family for whatever reason. You know the person that's at the dinner table or at the restaurant and when they go, okay, then everybody's like, oh, I guess we're leaving. You know, it's like that's, I don't have that. That doesn't work. My brother-in-law, he has that. When he stands up, it's like, we're all out of here. I haven't even got my food yet, but we're all going right now. It's the way it works. But that's what the disciples are going. They're like, okay, Jesus, about time we wrapping up here because it's late and we're in a desolate place. Like, what are we doing? Here's a lot of people. You know, they're going to get hungry. We're really tired. I know you've had an exhausting day. They're going to be hungry. We're really hungry. Let's wrap this up and go where we can hang out. Cool? And maybe you can provide for what we need. They have ideas of what Jesus should do. And then this is how Jesus replies. I love it. It's like, it's getting late. So the crowds, send the crowds away. They're very compassionate people. They're very compassionate. Send the crowds away. Jesus has compassion. They want them to go away. So they can go to their villages, very responsible. So they can go do all the things that they need to do. They can take responsibility for their life and buy their own food and have their own family time. And kind of like they need to go, right, Jesus? That sounds like a good boundary thing to be pushing them to. And then, let me go back to that verse real quick for me. Sorry. And so villages and buy themselves some food is what happens right here. So they've got great ideas of what should be happening with the crowd right here. And then Jesus replies with this. I love Jesus. He's so compelling. It makes me laugh too. They don't need to go away. You give them something to eat. Now, Jesus, I don't know if you heard me. There's a large crowd. We don't have anything. We've given up everything to follow you. This crew right here of followers of Jesus that have been like following you everywhere, we don't have a lot of money. You know that. And there's a lot of people, and they're going to get hangry, and we're a little hangry already, and we don't have anything. We were kind of hoping that you would have the plan for what the meal was going to be. Some of you, you're like, this is a forerunner to your Thanksgiving meal this week, right? All these people are here, and you got to feed them, and you're just trying to get them away, and Jesus is like, no, you give them something to eat. And you're like, oh, we had lunch. Now they're staying for dinner too? You know? Just kidding. If you're at my house, just kidding. But there's this tension that happens. When those certain people that God interacts you with, and he's like, no, I need you to meet this need. No, God, no. God, you meet needs, God. I'm a prayer warrior for you to meet needs, Jesus. These are the needs that you meet. You know, it's like, there's that opportunity that keeps coming back to you, or is that woman in your neighborhood that keeps asking questions about the church or the Bible, and you keep feeling nudges of God that maybe you could help, or maybe you could lead something, or maybe you need to have a conversation with her, and then you go, you know what, I don't meet those needs. I pray about those needs being met for her, you know? I'm not a go on a mission trip type of person. I'm a pray for people that go on mission trip type of person. You know, like I'm very spiritual about that. I know they need help in mission kids, and the people ought to be of serving. Maybe, man, you know, the next generation is so important in mission students and mission kids. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to pray. I'm going to pray that those needs are met. And Jesus is going, you don't need to pray about it. I already said yes for you. Get involved. Serve. You don't need a God card. You give them something to eat. I pray for my neighbors to have their needs met. God's like, yeah, you don't need to pray for it. I want you. I've got you uniquely and purposely placed there at such a time as this to meet those needs. And God's going, I want you to do it. Then they start making excuses. That's what I would do. Verse 17, right? It's like, let me backpedal a little bit. Maybe you misheard about how many people. We have only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. They answered. Verse 18, Jesus is like, all right, that's good. Bring them to me. I can work with that. Like, what do you got? What's in your hand? They're like, we have no food. Like, you know, our pets' heads are falling off. Like, we got nothing right here. We don't have enough for anybody. We aren't prepared. We aren't equipped. We can't. You got the wrong guys. All we got is a Happy Meal. And he's like, what do you have in your hands? What do you got? And bring it to me. Because whatever you have in your hands that I can work with to meet the needs of people. And I will allow you to meet their needs if you put it in my hands. I can work with that. I've only been to 2 years of college or high school. I can barely even I didn't even graduate. I got street smarts, but I got no other smarts. Jesus is like, that's all right, bring that here. I can work with that. for you to meet people's needs? I don't know any of the Bible barely. I'm working on it, but it's confusing to me and I don't know all the Bible. And Jesus is like, that's great. I wrote it. Bring that here to me. So I can work with that. I don't know. I've got a rough past. I don't know if I would be any good in the kingdom. I don't know if people really find out about that thing that God has forgiven me for, if I would be useful in the kingdom anymore. And Jesus like, I know everything about you. Bring it here. And we can make it useful for the kingdom. I have no time. That's all right. Make time and bring it to me, and we'll be useful for the kingdom. I don't have any of the answers. That's all right. Just like I am the answer. I'm not Allen Iverson, but I'm the answer. So bring it to me. We got all these excuses that we want to make. I don't have enough experience. That's all right. Bring it to me. There's this principle at work here, is that I do what only I can do, and then I trust God to do what only he can do. Jesus is not concerned with your lack of ability to provide for all the people. That wasn't their job. Their job was to bring him what they had and let him do the work. I get messed up. When I get this principle backwards, when I'm like, well, I got to do all that I can do and hopefully God shows up and blesses what I do. That's completely backwards. The principle is I do what only I can do and I bring that to Jesus so that God can do what only he can do through it. That's exactly the way it works. Matthew 14, 19 through 21, we'll kind of fly through this part right here. It goes like this. It says, and he directed the people to sit down on the grass, taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. And then he gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the people. So again, this is cool right here. Jesus could have done it all on his own. He's making the happy meal to feed everyone right here. It's pretty incredible. It's pretty impressive. But he lets them play because they had a role. They brought what only they had, put it in God's hands so that God could do what only he could do. And God put it back in their hands to serve the people that were in need. There's probably a principle in there for us somewhere. And the disciples gave them to the people. They all ate and were satisfied. Next verse says, and the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over. There's about 12 disciples and apostles that were probably handing it out right here. And God's like, wink, wink, showing off a little bit. You brought me a happy meal and you got a whole basket full of stuff left over. If you just bring what you have to my hands and then we'll serve all the people, you have more than you would possibly need for yourself because it will fill you up. Then the number of those who ate that day was about 5,000 men besides women and children. Women and children, I'm sorry, you count today. They didn't count you here. So it's way more than 5,000. They only had what only they could do and what only they could bring to Jesus. And he said, that's fine. Bring it here. I'll do what only I can do and then let you play in this game of the kingdom to meet people's needs. That's compelling to me. And you know what happens is that they did what they knew how to do and people were impacted. They did what they knew how to do, trusted Jesus would do something miraculous, and their faith was stretched. You think they ever looked at a bread the same way? You think they ever looked at a Happy Meal the same way ever again? They did what they knew how to do, trusting Jesus and to do something that only he could do, and their faith grew because of it. They did what only they knew how to do, trusting God would do something that only he could do, and their confidence in God was expanded. For the next time that people were in need, that God would meet their needs and he may use them to be a part of it. Have you been there? Not when you've seen a Happy Meal feed 5,000 people. I don't mean that. Have you been there when you think, I think God uniquely put me in that conversation, in that neighborhood, on that team, heard that need, saw that thing have you been there where you feel like God uniquely put you right there and he uniquely had stuff in your hands that you could do and that you went, okay, God, I think I'm supposed to step into this moment, and you kind of trusted him and kind of gave it back to him and he impacted a ton of people around you? Have you been? I want that for every single one of us because it's really hard to drift when you've watched God show off like that and you got to be a part of it. But when we just watch and stop working, drift is really, really possible. So I want to do something that's been helpful for me through the years, just to maybe help us kind of process of maybe how God has wired you, where he's placed you, and what he would want to do that you could bring back to him and he would impact people through you. And it's this idea of shape. So what I don't want you to do, this is a terrible pickup line. You don't walk out of church today and be like, babe, you got a good shape on you. So, all right, we're not doing any of that. It's terrible. Don't do it. We're not like no Ed Sheeran singing, none of this. But this helpful to say we all have a unique shape that God has given us, and don't use it as a cheesy pickup line. Deal? Deal. All right, there we go. But the first thing, God has uniquely given us spiritual gifts. Every Christ follower, every follower of Jesus has uniquely been empowered by him, by the Holy Spirit to bring with the gifts so that we could serve the kingdom and bring glory to God, period. You have a role to play. And it's more important than you could possibly imagine. And the gifts that you've been given are not about you, ever. They are about the one who gave you the gifts. And we're responsible for what he's put in our hands to steward well for the glory of him and for the impact of others. We've all been given spiritual gifts. We've all been given this heart. The thing that stirs your heart, the thing that maybe you turn the channel because when you hear about that issue, it does stuff on the inside of your heart because you've got this thing, like your heart goes towards foster kids, or your heart goes towards students knowing about Jesus, your heart goes towards our homeless friends, or your heart goes to helping meet needs through people going through tough times, or your heart goes to helping mentor marriages, or your heart goes to helping serve those that are under resources, making people feel welcome, your heart goes to helping restore people that have been trafficked, or people that your heart goes to people that are recovering and trying to walk sober-minded through addiction. Your heart just immediately goes there. You've all been wired with spiritual gifts, and you all been wired with the heart that God has uniquely given to you. Then stuff will stir your heart that may not stir anyone else's heart. And God's going, exactly. I got you in the shape I need you to be. Because we all have abilities too, spiritual gifts and heart and abilities. The things that you've just always been good at. Just a natural thing that you were wired with. Hospitality or fixing cars or home repairs or teaching or leading or organization or coaching or athletic ability, clearly, or it's a joke, or musical ability or graphic design or music production, just the stuff that you have naturally just been good at over the year. God has uniquely gifted you in those situations with unique heart, with unique spiritual gifts, and with unique abilities that are unique to you. And he has a role for you to play. So stop watching and start working. P is personality. Some of you don't have one. It's fine. No, I'm kidding. It's a joke. Myers-Briggs, DISC, Strength Finder, Enneagram, do all the work, colors and animals, do it all. It's all great. It's all a prism of the unique personality that God has wired you. Just get to know it's not a limitation for you, but it's actually an encouragement that God has uniquely wired you with spiritual gifts, a heart, abilities, and personality that are unique to you, and he has a role for you to play in the kingdom. And E is experiences. You are the only you that God has made. You are uniquely you. You trying to be anyone else, the world does not need any other Mike Hickersons. Hallelujah. You would be a terrible Mike Hickerson, and I would be a terrible you. God has uniquely shaped you to be you with unique experiences and gifts and abilities and personality and heartbeat that he's given you. So who are you not to play in the kingdom with all that he has done? And you do what only you can do with the unique shape that God has given you, and you trust God to do the rest. And he lets us play to impact the kingdom. In fact, 1 Corinthians 12 says it this way. I love this verse. It says, each person, this is the Message translation, it says, each person is given something to do that shows who God is. Everyone gets in on it, and everyone benefits. We all benefit when you are uniquely you the way God has wired you to be, and you use those unique spiritual gifts and hearts and abilities and personality and experiences, and we're all doing that together as the church to impact our world for good and for his kingdom and glory. That's good. That's a good day. That's a good season. That's good impact. And then it says this in this verse 6, all kinds of things are handed out by the Spirit and to all kinds of people. The variety is wonderful. So 2 quick challenges. Don't compare with other people. It's like annoying to the gift giver, right? You've been a parent of more than one kid at Christmas, and you have to make sure the gifts are the same size, even though one is about a few zeros more on the ends. Or you know what I'm saying? You don't want to be the parent. It's a little annoying as a parent when the kids that you've given gifts for free are comparing about the size and the style of the gifts to each other, right? Am I the only one? And I have awesome girls. I'm just saying, God has uniquely gifted and wired you. don't get jealous or worried about how he's uniquely gifted and wired somebody else. Cheer them on towards obedience in him. Second thing, second challenge, don't should on the church. I have to enunciate this clearly for some of us. Because what we do is we like, you know what you should do? I mean, people are shooting all over each other. So like, you with me now while we're enunciating it? So it's very careful. You have to be but don't should on the church. Because what happens is God uniquely sometimes gives you a unique heart, you a unique calling. And you know what we do with it? We're like, you know what you should do, church? You should do my unique calling. And God's going, I didn't ask them to do it. I asked you to. Well, I'm shooting on them because they should do it or somebody should do it. And God's like, I asked you to do it because I uniquely shaped and gifted you to be that person in that place for that time, for such a time as this. So don't take the calling that God has placed on our hearts and should it on other people when it's the calling God has called you to do. And there's a challenge on that. That's hard. 2 encouragements, 2 questions maybe for everyone at Mission in this season, for us, so that we don't drift. Who are my people that God has uniquely placed me next to, or uniquely given me a heart for, or uniquely given me experiences that I can interact with? Who are my people that God has me placed by? And then second is, where's my place? I think if you want to stop watching and start working and not drift, you can answer those 2 questions with white hot intensity, and and you are like in it because you know exactly where God has placed you. You know exactly what God has called you to do, and you're going for it. And I want that for all of us. Man, I don't want you to drift. I don't want us to get into the habit where we watch other people play in the kingdom, and we forget that, man, God has uniquely shaped all of us for such a time as this. Why don't you pray with me? God, you are good, and you are great, and you knew what you got when you made us. You're not surprised by any of our gifts or heart or ability or personality or experiences, God. God, would you give us a vision for your kingdom, a vision for what life with you looks like, a vision of what it means to be servant-hearted, and a vision to serve other people, a vision to say, man, this is what I got, God, and I'll bring it to you to do what only you can do, God. And God, would you give us eyes to see the impact that we can make and have and get to be part of how you transform and provide for people. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.